So now I'm about ready to get started with the first image. This is the basic image, but like I said, these are going to be some pretty advanced techniques compared to what you're used to seeing. With the first image, we're going to be stepping beyond the standard stuff that you may have been taught or that you can find on YouTube in a lot of places. Now, the methods that are taught, the basic methods, are pretty good to use in some situations, but I'm not teaching that here today. I'm going to actually show you on this image why those methods don't work. The image that we're going to be working with has a crazy amount of flyaways all around the head, and our client request is to get rid of all that stuff and really simplify it down. So let's take a look at this image. You'll see why it's going to be such a challenge right off the bat, and I'll start going through some of the techniques that you might know and really quickly show you why those won't work. So this will mimic a real life situation where you go in and try to use those techniques and you go, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble. So let's get started. Now, you can immediately see how serious the flyaway situation is with this hair. We've got a black and white image, so that's nice. We don't have to be worrying about color right now with these first steps. We're just worrying about black and white. Now, there's a lot of good contrast in this image between the foreground and background. So that might make you think right off the bat that, oh, this is probably going to be a pretty easy one. But once we get a little closer and see just how serious the flyaway situation is, you immediately start to get that sense of dread that, or at least I do, when I look at this, that this is going to take a really long time. I think I can do it, but the only way to figure that out is to just go for it. Now, that's the past. What I'm going to be teaching you with this image is something that you can repeat every time, and you don't have to worry about how can I put together all of the methods that I know and keep hacking away at it. And who knows, maybe I spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, even 3 hours, and end up realizing that I'm just not going to be able to pull it off, because that's the great fear. So let's take a look at some of the more traditional techniques really quick, and I'll show you what the problems are with some of these, and that'll help you recognize in the future if you do try to use some of them on an image, and you'll be able to identify that they're not working really quickly, so you can back off and pivot to a new method. So number one, the most basic technique that a lot of people use, which is fine in some cases, is to just use the clone stamp tool on a new layer and try to go in and start removing these guys. Make sure my flow and opacity are up at 100. So as you can see, it works fine because our background is pretty much a flat color. But, where do I end here? The amount of care, because there's so much flyaway to deal with, is there's always going to be this edge along here where all the flyaways stop. Just because of the complexity. This is a problem with the tool working with this level of complexity. I mean, we could try to go in here and painstakingly make the strands look like they terminate in a natural way. But to me, when I spend just a few minutes doing that, and then I zoom out and I look at the whole mountain of flyaways that I'm going to have to do that to, that's just not a time effective technique. So that, to me, immediately I can see that the clone stamp tool is not a good choice. Next up for number 2 is dust and scratches. A lot of people will teach using dust and scratches to eliminate the flyaways. But as you can see here, you know, that works really nicely when there are like 2 or 3 or you know, not very many flyaways, and they're perfect and they fly directly away from the hair and they're super fine. Dust and scratches can take those off pretty well, but in a situation like this, it's just really not doing a good job at all. It's basically just blurring the image. When I bring the threshold back up, a lot of the flyaways come back. I'm just not getting good results with that either. I wouldn't want to start there. All right, for number 3 is surface blur. Now, it gets pretty good results in some cases. Let's take a look at it here. So I'm going to crank the radius up. And the threshold. So no matter the settings, no matter how far I push it, we're still getting a ton of flyaway clumps on the edges all over here. So that right there tells me that surface blur is not going to do a good job. I don't really want to go in and have to clone away this stuff and still rebuild all of this edge. Just looks kind of like a nightmare to me. So we've got to try to find something else. So what the clients asked us to do in this case is some pretty serious cleaning of the outside edge of the hair and getting all those flyaways off. Also taking off some flyaways that are inside the hair that are coming over the skin. So we've looked at those 3 techniques and we know none of those are really going to work for this job. So let's take a look at the client notes and figure out the tools that we're going to use to really tackle it. So here's my folder with our client's notes, and they've circled and outlined a bunch of stuff for us. So this is the trim they want on the back. Trim the top. And a line has been drawn for how the edge of this side of the hair needs to go. So you can see there's some pretty substantial chops that need to happen from the outside of this hair silhouette. In addition to that, we've got some notes on the inside where the flyaways come into the skin, and some patching work where there's some open spaces in the hair that are distracting. Let's start with the outside trimming of the hair first, and I'll show you how we do that, starting with the clone stamp tool, but not in the way that you're used to seeing. Basically what I want to do with this edging job, removing all these flyaways, is I want to step way back, and I don't want to go in with like a molecular process that I'm looking at every single pixel trying to clean everything off the edge with super precision. That sounds terrible to me. What I want to do, and you might remember this from my previous tutorial, is I don't want to deal with the edge that I have. I want to create my own edge, the edge that I would want. So this is the same thing. I'm just going to go in there and just brutally clone off all of that flyaway stuff, because I'd rather create kind of a hard edge that doesn't look real and rebuild that out by hand to look real, rather than dealing with noodling with all of these millions of flyaways trying to somehow maybe get that to look real, because I know from experience that's just not going to happen. So let's take a look at the stamp tool. Hit S. I'm going to bring up a new layer We can ditch the old one that I just duplicated up. Go to the stamp tool. Let's get a big brush. I'm going to make it super hard edge brush. And we don't have much background information to worry about, so this is pretty easy. I'm just going to go in there and trim right down to the edge. Oops, looks like I cloned the line. Make sure not to do that. Make sure it's set to current and below for your sampling. All right, cool. Let's take that line off. Well, we have a beautiful edge, but it certainly doesn't look real. So let's make it look real. I'd rather start from a relatively solid edge here than to have the whole thing be sort of the remnants of the flyaways here. I'll keep some of them, but when you can find a hard edge where the hair is really opaque, it can be a lot easier to draw a new edge in those locations than it can be to start with a lot of flyaway information like in here. But in these areas, we've got to kind of stick with that because there's really no area for a hard edge unless I come all the way in like here. So we'll just have to deal with that, and I'll show you how. What we're going to do now is basically just paint an entirely new flyaway system along the edge here, but it's one that we want. So once again, this is the thing that you want to keep in mind. Create the edge that you want. There's still going to be flyaways. It's not going to look natural if we eliminate like all of the flyaways. That won't look natural because of the fact that the interior of the hair has a flyaway quality that suggests that outside the hair there should at least be some, because it's the nature of this model's hair and the way it is. So when your eye looks at the interior of the hair, all the hair structure kind of signals to you that there's definitely going to be some flyaways that are coming off the edge. But we just want to make those flyaways nice and contained and beautiful according to our own sort of beauty standards and techniques that we've developed for doing fashion type retouching. All right, so I'm going to switch to my brush tool and set to the soft round pressure size, nothing fancy there, and bring it all the way down to 1 pixel brush. That pixel size, that brush size is going to be different depending on the size of the image you have and the subject. So what you can do is just draw a line next to the existing hair and see if that looks about right. And I think that looks about the same width. So just check that. It's very important not to have a brush size that is quite a lot bigger than the hair that you're trying to recreate, because it's going to look really crazy and there's really not a good way to reduce that width. So if you go for a ways using a brush that's too big, you need to just stop and start over, because that's going to be a road that you don't want to spend too much time going down, because you might not be able to salvage that work. The important thing in this case is to start with a brush size that is perfect right from the bat, so you don't have to deal with that headache later. So you'll see how relatively easy this is. We're just going to sample a color from here somewhere in the hair. So we don't have to be super precise here, actually. And it can sometimes even be better if I zoom out a bit. Now, if you don't like a stroke that you did, definitely undo it right then, because trying to remove them later is really hard. Now, one thing I can do too is rotate by holding down R to get the hair into a better position. So it's aligned with the way that my hand naturally makes the brush stroke. So you'll have to experiment with that a bit. And you can set it back by holding down R and hitting escape. Now, after watching me paint here for a little bit, there are a couple things you might be noticing. First is that I'm using a tablet, definitely. I don't really know if you could do this method with a mouse or a trackpad at all. Using a tablet is key to getting these natural looking strokes. The next thing you might notice is that this isn't looking very real right now. That's okay. As long as we're bordering within like the 70 to 80% of real with these hair strands, that's fine, because the real is going to come in later. So just suspend that critical eye right now, because later what we're going to do is some integration techniques that make these lines, these really beautiful, perfect lines, look like real hair. So don't worry about that yet. You're just getting the structure down. Now, last, you might be noticing, wow, you're really painting a ton of hair, and that's right. But honestly, this technique, once you get going fast enough with it, will go a lot faster than you actually think. And it's a good point to remember, just like with any traditional media drawing, you really have to get warmed up. And I'm not warmed up yet. I just started this. So some of my lines are a little bit unsure, and maybe I'm not going as fast as I can. Don't worry about that now, because you're going to see me speed up, and I'm going to get a lot looser, and I'm going to be able to make a lot more hair a lot more quickly. And yes, you have to do it strand by strand like this. There's some workarounds with brushes that are sort of repeat themselves. We'll look at those later. But in this case, I want to show you the basic by hand principle that most high-end retouchers will know how to do. So notice that close to the hair, I'm doing a lot of like scribbling basically, because I want to make that into a much more natural edge. And there's going to be a lot of hair massing right up next to the body of the hair. But then as it comes out, I'm going to do some more flyaways that extend more further out from the hair. So you can see how fast I'm moving here. I'm moving really pretty fast, and I'm going up and down along the image edge and just working it as I go in different places when I think that maybe they look like they could use a little more, or whatever. So I don't do that part in a super linear fashion. I mean, I just keep revisiting the whole line of the hair in order to get a feeling for the overall consistency and quality of the hair. Now, the more you stare at this, and especially when you first start using this method, you're probably going to think that it's just not looking real, or it's just not looking right. I really suggest that you work it for a while, kind of get it to this level, step away for a second and come back, like let your eyes rest or just look at something else for a couple minutes. Because when you come back to this, your eyes, if they've kind of reset, it's going to look a lot more real and you're going to be a lot more pleased with the results. And once again, we're not done with this line. We're going to get it to integrate even better after we've finished the entire silhouette. So I'm going to trim off the rest of the hair according to the line that's in our comments. And then I'm just going to keep painting. Notice that this went pretty quickly in terms of as that many hairs that I've created and that clean of a line. In a pretty short amount of time, I got, maybe about 30% of the job already done. So you can see once you practice and get fast, it's going to move pretty fast. So I'm just going to keep going and paint the entire silhouette of the hair. Cool, so now I have a pretty consistent hair edge. Now notice that down here, the hair in the photograph is pretty out of focus and it's pretty blurry. So the hair that I painted in there, I'm gonna make it to match that. It doesn't look like it matches right now. I'm gonna do a little bit more work on these sections here. You see, I tried to recreate some of these bigger curls, that there's detail still in the hair here that shows that there would have been a bigger curl there. So I try to connect those to just make it look a little bit more natural. I mean, you'll see the magic of working in this way is that you're creating everything that you want, that you think looks good. And the problem that a lot of retouchers run into is that they just work with what's in the image and they think that they're bound to the photographic elements in the image. But once you develop all these kinds of techniques, you realize in a lot of cases you're not. You can just paint stuff. And the better you get, the more you'll do that in general, is just really creating the qualities or the elements that you want just by using the tools in Photoshop, lots of times the painting tools. So you can see over here, the hair has a lot better matchup with the hair that I've painted has a lot better matchup with what's actually in the photograph in terms of the focus. So what we've got to do next is make that hair look real. Now, hair, especially flyaways, has all these qualities that are affected by the environment and by the quality of the material that hair is. So hair's luminous. Basically, it picks up light. It catches light. And it gets eaten up by light. So that's when you see those really strange qualities of light shining through hair, especially when a camera captures it. It tends to somewhat disappear on the long strands, but where strands cross or where there are a lot of strands crossing, that's where the camera captures more of an opaque bit of information. So it's got that particular quality. The hair that we created here is way too uniform. It may be accurate in terms of the width, in terms of what's really there, but visually it's not accurate yet. So we need to deal with the sharpness of the hair we created, the texture of the hair we created, and the luminosity qualities caused by light. So I'll show you how to do those in just really 3 easy steps.